Вітаю, шановне товариство! Мене звуть Світлана Мельник і я старша лекторка на кафедрі слов'янських та східноєвропейських мов та культур в університеті Індіани. Хочу висловити щиру подяку пані Клер Гріфін, а також її команді Ірині Волошиній та Світлані Коноваловій за організацію цієї важливої конференції. І також вдячна всім тим нашим спонсорам, які уможливили сьогоднішню розмову. Мені надзвичайно приємно сьогодні головувати на цій секції і приємно дуже оголосити учасників цієї секції, бо це не тільки знані дослідники, інтелектуали, а ще й фахівці, яких ми мали честь вітати в університеті Індіани. Пана Олександра у 2020 році як учасника першої Шевченківської конференції, і він виголосив пленарну доповідь, тоді блискучу доповідь. А пані Марію як стипендіатку нерезидентської програми Університету Індіани та України. І від себе хочу додати, що лекції та доповіді пана Олександра і пані Марії викликали захоплення і студентів, і колег, і тому надзвичайно приємно, що вони сьогодні з нами. Отож, пан Олександр Myhkhed – письменник, культуролог, кандидат філологічних наук, автор 10 книжок, окремі есеї та уривки з яких перекладені 10 мовами світу. Брав участь у літературних резиденціях у Фінляндії, Латвії, Ісландії, США та Франції, а також у віртуальній резиденції Оксфордського університету. Пан Олександр пише для українських та закордонних медій, зокрема для таких видань, як Financial Times і Guardian. Він також був гостем телерадіокомпаній CNN та NPR. Його відома книжка з міжнародною назвою «Мова війни» потрапила до списку книжок, які необхідно прочитати у 2024 році від Financial Times. Пан Олександр є членом українського пен-клубу і зараз служить у Збройних силах України. Пане Олександре, дякуємо за службу. І я одразу оголошу нашу дискутантку. Це пані Марія Зубrytska, літературознавиця та перекладачка. Як я вже зазначила, пані Марія – стипендіатка нерезидентської програми з першої когорти 2022-2023 років. Пані Марія – доцентка кафедри теорії літератури та компаративістики філологічного факультету Львівського національного університету імені Івана Франка, проректорка з міжнародних зв'язків Львівського національного університету, авторка монографічного дослідження «Homo legens» – читання як соціокультурний феномен та численних статей про українську літературу та культуру. Вибрані статті англійською мовою пані Марії про перспективи та виклики української культури в сучасному глобальному контексті, про культурну ідентифікацію в сучасній українській літературі, а також комунікативну роль метафори мовчання в поезії Тараса Шевченка друкувалися у виданнях у Австралії та Сполучених Штатах Америки. Вітаю, шановні колеги! Дякую за те, що зголосилися сьогодні взяти участь у конференції. Це велика честь для нас сьогодні послухати ваші доповіді. Пане Олександре, вам слово.
Дякую, пані Світлано. Dear colleagues, thanks for the invitation. That's a huge honor to be a part of this great event. And this is a huge honor to be with Pani Marina on this great talk. I'll take around 30 minutes for the presentation. I have 77 slides and we will try to read them and go through them as fast as it's possible. The basis of my talk is a series of trips to Luhansk and Donetsk regions that me and the team that I was part of, we provided since the December of 2016 till March 2018. So the idea, what I will talk is the result of this research and what we have found, what we have showed in the public spaces and what happened to the things that we found, what happened since the full-scale invasion, because usually this is the trickiest part of anything that happened in Ukraine before the 2022. So let's start with the first slide or second. So this is the map of our research. We researched in 6 cities: Dobropilya, Pokrovsk, Konstantinivka, Bakhmut, Lysychansk, Severodonetsk. And what you can see with the dots, these are the lines, the border lines of so-called DNR and LNR. Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People Republic, and the parts that were occupied since 2014. And as you can see from this map, the 3 cities that we've researched are now under the Russian occupation since the full-scale invasion. Konstantinivka and Pokrovsk are under threat, and Dobropilya is under the constant missile strikes. The time frame, as I've mentioned, is December 2016, 2018. Next, please. This was the thing called Meta Misto or Meta City, and it consists of several parts. This project, the urban studies, which was provided by the organization called Urban Curators, they researched around the requests of the city, what might be done in terms of the architecture and in terms of the urban creations, I would say, and the result of their research was a publication. And secondly, it was in each city, the Formografia Design Studio, a duo of just brilliant architects. They provided and created new spaces. So that was the urban part was one. Second part was actually my project called the Mythologema Mista, or Mythologem of the City. And I was a curator of this, and I worked with 6 artists. One was a historian figure. I will tell much more about him in my talk. And
Are we having technical problems?
Yes, looks like Pan Oleksandr is frozen.
Okay, I
Maybe
was wondering if it was just me. Okay.
No, maybe
Can-
unstable internet connection.
Ah,
can you hear me? I've came
yes.
back.
Yes.
All
Great.
right, all right. So the third part was cultural research, and the activists of Congress of Culture, they tried to make a compendium of the contexts and all the initiatives that were organized in these 6 cities. Next slide, please. So these are the portraits. So we've been around 20 of us in our multidisciplinary approach, and I just wanted to show you that was multidisciplinary and research that took us for 1.5 years. And next slide, please. So my part about the identity was about finding the smallest particle of the myth that might be shared by all the citizens of the particular or respected city. So the idea was to go through the archives and go through the deep talks with the community and going through the local history and finding the story that might be shared by all of them. And then this story should be embodied through the certain artistic project. Either this supposed to be a mural or a sculpture in the public space or something else. And so the idea was to work with finding the compromise between the communist past and with the idea of, can we, like, next slide, with the idea of looking into the future. And it was really important in terms of programming the mind and the feelings of locals. And that was a very special time in the history of Ukrainian East, because this was the time of the beginning, the transition of the decommunization project. So basically what happened that the 50%, for example, 50% of citizens of Pokrovsk would call it Krasnoarmysk, or but the younger generation would call it Pokrovsk. The same thing happening with Bakhmut, also known at that time as Artyomovsk. And this is really interesting because with the flow of time, we've realized that how the importance of this decommunization project, because for example, when the battle for Bakhmut happened, Russian media and Russian propaganda and ideology would show this city as solely as Artyomovsk, and they fought for the communist past and the communist shadows of this city. But for Ukrainians, it was for sure Bakhmut as the sign of the Ukrainian identity that should be shared there. I would say another important thing is the search of the meta myth. Is there any story that might be shared by the whole region? And I will give my answer in the end of this talk. Next slide, please. So the first city is Lysychansk, and next slide. And in this city, our architects, they provided the skate park, the urban culture center. Next slide. Which became one of the biggest points for gathering of the informal teens and youth culture. And it was really important because when the Russian occupiers started hitting, for example, Lysychansk, this became one of the shelters for the youngsters. But for sure, in the summer of 2017, when we made it, it was just a center for the culture. Next slide. And in terms of mythology, we've picked up the figure of Volodymyr Susura, who is a famous Ukrainian classical poet, and he was not born in Lysychansk, but his childhood, he spent his childhood there. Next slide. And we've picked up the lines of his one of the most famous, that's the place where his museum is, and the local center of culture. Named after Volodymyr Susura. Next slide. So we've picked up the lines from his one of the most famous poems, Love to Ukraine, Любить Україну, but we've picked up the lines which are Любить Україну, як сонце любить, not, we've picked up the lines that not all Ukrainians know, and we wanted to show this feeling of deep love and gratitude to the fatherland through the different parts. And we've created a certain map of Lysychansk in different places as a puzzle for this. And I worked, next slide. I worked with the artist whose name is Jerzy Konopie, and he usually works with the street art. Мов садом рясним сіяє вона над віками on the old market. Next, please. Next, please. This, please remember this one. This one is, this one will play a huge role in the end of our lecture, because this one will be in the media when the Russian occupants will be in Lysychansk. As you see, there is a sign as Slava Ukraini as well, and it was really important for us to save this one. Next, please. And one of the most significant one was created on the local beach, as it is the public space. And next, please. So the classical Ukrainian poetry would go to the widest audience as it's possible, as well as marking the national identity space and remembering that Lysychansk is the part of Ukrainian culture, as well as it was the story of this city, and the story of childhood of Volodymyr Susura was described in his famous autobiography nonfiction called Tretya Rota, and it was really important to talk about. Next slide, please. So the next one is Bakhmut. And next, please. So our architects, they created the open public space with the open scene, so anybody could perform or give lectures there. Next slide. So it was something about the formative for a local community to have a beautiful thing that might be shared by everybody. Next slide, please. And in terms of the just beautiful pictures of what's been destroyed by Russians in the city, among other things. Next slide, please. So working for this mythology of this city, I've cooperated with the Kharkiv-based famous Ukrainian artist whose name is Konstantin Zorkin, and his idea was to create a shadow that is mirroring the flow of clouds, and his idea was how you can get back or have a look back at your past and still see it clearly. And this is the public space sculpture. Claire, just 3 slides next, like showing how what this is a sketch, and then the process, and next, and next. This is the local artist Andrei Parachin who helped us, and the next one is the actual size. So this is Konstantin Zorkin standing in front of his shadow, and his idea was to so people would interact with their past. And I think this is really important because we've picked up the place in the central park of Bakhmut, and this was some kind of the crossroad. You see there are 3 ways of how you can go, and the shadow of your past that you could see clearly in this poetic way is the 3rd one, is the 4th one even. Next slide, please. So the next one is Pokrovsk, and this is one of my favorite stories because here we found out the figure of Marko Mikitovich Zhelezniak, who was born in 1892 and he died in 1983 or 2, so he lived 90 years, and he was for the first time he picked up a photo camera in 1905, and he's created, Claire, please 2 or 3 slides further. So these are pictures of our architectures. They've created another public space called Zhelezniak, and Zhelezniak is iron and steel. So they picked up the constructions from the local mine and they put them in the public space, creating this. Next, please. So again, you have the space for lectures, for cinema showing, concerts, etc. And next, please. So the idea was to get back the brand of Zaliznak into local context. This is picture of Marko Mikhaitovich made by his son Andriy, who later became photographer himself in Donetsk. And the story tells that throughout his career of 90 years as a chronographer who followed the whole 20th century, he created around 5,000 photos, and I picked up this as my aim to find at least a part of this archive. Next, please. And he participated as a combatant in the World War I. He was the official photographer for decolonization and collectivization, and then he participated as the combatant in the World War II when he was 50 years old. So this is a huge figure who is deeply rooted into Ukrainian context, as well as he was really gifted, as he's not only created great photos, he also provided 17 chapters of his memoir, and it was almost a detective story to find it. So for the getting the what might be the product for sharing his story with the locals, it was the public space exhibition. Next slide, please. Those were 2 cubes in the public space, so people could go around them and see them from different angles, interact with them, and then we presented them to the local museum that was destroyed last month as well. Next slide, please. No, that was the opening, and we've discovered that among the audience there was a guy who actually found out that he is a relative to Marko Zaliznak, and it was so hilarious to see that sometimes you need the group of curators from the outside to show you what belongs to you, and this is the part of how you work with the local identities in Ukraine, because sometimes you need just to rebrand it and to make it in a new contemporary way so people would love it. Next slide, please. So I made a publication which went viral, and usually on the occasion of Holodomor, people get back to this, and it's having now around 50,000 of views. And this is the old screenshot, and this is so important that what we found, it became a part of the public understanding of our history. Next slide, please. And locals then created Zaliznak Fest as the part of rebranding, and it was so important they would provide it each year since that time. Next slide, please. And then there is Severodonetsk, which is the engineers center of the eastern part of Ukraine, and it was so interesting to work there and with their identity. Please, I guess 3 slides showing the public space that was created based on the drawings of local kids, and our architects made this space in cooperation with the local library for youth. And then there is the work, these actually like a portal to this library created in the cooperation with the famous Ukrainian artist called Sergei Radkevich, and those are iconography with the hands that creating the world in the desert. Next slide, please. Because Severodonetsk was created in the 1920s, 1930s as just in the middle of nowhere near Lysychansk, as the small brother, younger brother of Lysychansk. And when you are actually in Severodonetsk, you could feel that this is something built on the desert. So that was the idea of creating something in the fight or the will against the entropy. And that was the idea of this murals, that and also creating the beautiful space for youngsters who were engaged in the activities in this library. Next slide, please. So this is the portal to that. And I guess on the next slide, there will be the back of the library. Yep. So everything was about being rooted to your country, being rooted to your land. And then there is Konstantinivka. And Konstantinivka was a really interesting space because this is the so-called Promka, the forgotten part of the industrial district of Konstantinivka, and this is something that is actually in the heart of the city, and this was old industrial part. Please, several next slides. So there was a public space on the riverbank with the part of the idea was to create a route through the heart of Konstantinivka to make it short. And then there was this huge hangar with the mural created by Myhkhed Art Studio. And the idea was to create the space for festivals, create the space for youngsters. And in the center of this mythology, there was the idea of the glass city, so-called Steklograd, as it was known from the Soviet times, that Konstantinivka was the center of production of beautiful glass. And the next slide, please. So there is a picture of famous fountain of glass that was represented in the New York exhibition, World Exposition, and it was made in Konstantinivka. So our mural was based on this idea of how this city still is fragile, but still it could provide beautiful pieces into social context, as well as there was this idea of rebuilding the industrial landscape and still give a hope for future for local youngsters. Next slide, please. So here is the fountain and the fragile glass that's someone is holding in their hands. Next slide, please. And I think there will be Dobropilya, and I suggest to skip Dobropilya as we don't have so much time left, I guess around 7 minutes. Yes, please, let's skip Dobropilya, unfortunately. And then there is the result of this. We've showed this in Kiev in 2018, and the idea was for asking for the artists to create new artworks based on the mythologems that they found there, and to present the results of each part of our research in Kiev. So there was this utopia, transformations of Ukrainian East, and we realized that at that moment, this was more about the vision, and it was more about this public discourse of what might be done in eastern part of Ukraine, and because we've got connected to a huge bunch of great activists who felt that they might influence greatly on the local context. And as we know, since the full-scale invasion started, none of this became reality, but we understood that that was utopia from the beginning. Let's see several pictures from that exhibition. Yes. So the idea was the combination of the new work combined with the documentation of what had happened in that. And for sure, yes. a beautiful kid in the beautiful space. It is so important to have the idea of the future. As the result of the project, we've made the book. Yeah, okay, why not? So as the result of the project, we've made a compendium of all. It is bilingual. If you're interested, I can send the link to organizers and you can read through this as everything, the mythology is described and all the results are described, as well as I've got connected to the ancestors of Marko Zalezniak, and I supported them in the publication of the book about Marko Zalezniak. And then the huge idea of the fragility, how fragile we are, was in the center of the whole project. And we realized that it's not only utopia, the fragile are all the works that are in the public space. People are fragile. The whole idea of activism is fragile. And asking about the meta myth, I realized that it doesn't work for Donetsk and Luhansk region, because usually you would see this as the dystopia of the lost something, dystopia, for example, of the paradise lost, that the industry was so flourishing in the Soviet time and we don't have it, or the idea of the beautiful trees or beautiful park or something like that, some reminiscence to golden age, and now we don't have it. But the thing that we realized, it never worked like that, because the whole idea of Donetsk and Luhansk region is that it is multifaceted, because it has so many dimensions and it has so many nationalities and it has so many particularities that you could not unify this to only one meta myth. And this, I guess, this was the biggest lesson for us. We have 3 minutes, so let's see what happened next with the whole project and what happened in these cities. Claire, please show us next pictures. So they held the youth music festival in Konstantinivka since that. They held the championships in Lysychansk since that time, and it worked for the locals. Yes? Yes, please. And then, oh, can you show us the previous one? And the previous one, please. Nah, we don't. Can you show us the print screen from the Telegram? It's next. And the next. Yes, we need this one. So this is the one of the important things that might happen to researcher and curator. This picture is the screenshot from the Russian war telegrams with so-called war correspondents. So in the July of 2022, when Russians entered Lysychansk, they wrote this message and made photos of our mural of Volodymyr Susura, and they said that they're amazed that these inscriptions are spread all over the city, and they feel that it is hostile to them, and they feel that this public space is marked by Ukrainian identity. And it was not only about the attitude of people to them and those who them discovered in Lysychansk among Ukrainians who were really hostile to them under the occupation, because this is the second occupation of Lysychansk since 2014. And they felt this in terms of the space. And I think this is a huge impact for myself, realizing that the utopia that we've created, it was fruitful, because when you're thinking about the future, you never think that the city might be under the occupation. Another important thing is that the whole archive of Marko Zalezniak now is under the occupation, and his ancestor, who is the holder of the whole archive, he survived through the occupation for 8 or 9 months, and he fled it, but he took only 2 photos of Zalezniak, and this is with himself. And this is really important that we digitalized, we scanned the part of the archive, and due to the Metamisto project, this is one of the places where one could find this and how it was preserved for the future generations. And please, let's have a look at the last slide, and I'm finished. So I wrote this whole story of this in the book called I Will Mix Your Blood with Coal, that was published exactly 5 years ago in May of 2020. Since that time, it's been translated into several languages and was published in United States 3 weeks ago. And the horrible thing is that the whole project of Metamista and the original version of the book, it was the last chapter of it. It was full of optimism and the trying to program the future and to think in the positive way. But then the full-scale invasion happened, and now 3 cities are under the occupation. Bakhmut is demolished, Pokrovsk is under the threat, Konstantinivka is under the threat, both cities are destroyed, and Dobropilla is also under the threat. So the whole project now became a certain time capsule, and those feelings of the activism, myth, optimism, and the experience of the Russian aggression since 2014, they are lost, and they are not presented anymore in the reality. And the only fragile state of existence of this memory is the project and the memories of people who are still with us, those who survived. Thanks for your attention. I would be glad to answer your questions.
Дуже дякую, пане Олександре, за блискучу доповідь. Надзвичайно цікаво вас було слухати і бачити ваші слайди. Я думаю, що ми можемо перейти до обговорення і надамо слово пані Марії, а потім безпосередньо вже, можливо, наші учасники поставлять вам питання. Прошу, пані Марію. Не чуємо вас, у вас мікрофон вимкнений.
Dear colleagues, it is a pleasure and honor to share my thoughts and respond to Oleksandr Myhked's speech, as well as his book. I can say without any exaggeration that all of Oleksandr's books are essential reading for anyone seeking to understand Ukraine. His works offer diverse ways to speak meaningfully about Ukraine, its history, the richness of its culture, and its deep European heritage. His nonfiction book, I Will Mix Your Blood with Coal, Snapshots from the East of Ukraine, has received wide acclaim both in Ukraine and internationally. Based on the author's personal journeys through 6 cities in the Donetsk and Luhansk region, the book offers a mosaic of voices from local residents. It gives us a window into their lived realities, reflecting their views on a range of issues without imposing the author's own commentary. In doing so, it invites the readers to listen, to interpret, and to begin understanding the region from within. One of the book's significant contribution is how it helps readers cuts through layers of Soviet propaganda and the totalitarian politics of memory. It sheds light on how the myth of Donbass was constructed and how that myth later served as a false justification for Russian aggression. I would like to stress that the geographical term Donbass, commonly used today to refer to the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, is itself a product of Russian imperial myth. Soviet propaganda actively promoted this toponym, seeking to portray the area as a wild, uninhabited land before the arrival of the Bolsheviks. In such a way, the Soviet government was trying to erase the memory of the region's Ukrainian past. For those interested in learning more about this Russian imperial myth, including the toponymic, linguistic, ethnic, and civilizational myths, I highly recommend visiting the website of the Ukraine Crisis Media Center, which offers further insights into the important subject. I Will Mix Your Blood with Coal presents all the key myths of Soviet and Russian propaganda. Metaphorically speaking, this work of post-traumatic storytelling from 6 cities in the Donetsk and Lugansk region opens not just windows, but sliding glass doors, inviting readers to step into the landscape of Ukraine's East through a geopoetic lenses. It allows us to witness everyday life, to hear echoes of sweet memories of utopia that never truly existed, and to feel transported through the other's vivid narrative into a radically different world. This world is not portrayed as the engine of modernity's achievements, but rather as a place often perceived as epigonal, a region seen as trailing behind, merely reproducing the stages already covered by modern civilization. Yet this framing is challenged by the voices we encounter, miners, intellectuals, and activists born in Eastern Ukraine who reflect on their region's complex identity. Readers also gain insight into a lesser known history, the role of Belgian and British investors in founding industrial cities in the East, as well as the region's experience during the First and Second World Wars. And for those curious about unexpected details, such as how one of the oldest turtles in the world is connected to the founding of Donetsk, or what the true cost of each ton of mined coal, or what stories lie hidden in the steppes of the wild fields. This book will offer them all. Through this imaginative journey, Oleksandr offers a panorama of life in Ukraine East during the years of war leading to the full-scale invasion. More broadly, I Will Mix Your Blood with Coal tell us how coal mining has shaped Ukraine East and the human condition of those who live there. It also shows how the Soviet and later Moscow's propaganda machine paved the way for Russian invasion, waging a war on minds. On every page, readers will find vivid evidence of this long-term colonization of minds. Most importantly, they will come to understand how and why the Donetsk and Luhansk regions became a separatist enclave. Even today, for a large part of the Russian-speaking population in these regions, it still feels self-evident that their cities were saved from genocide by Vladimir Putin, that Donbass was rescued from a Nazi threat by its Russian neighbors, and that its future and its very survival depends entirely on Moscow. When Moscow's propaganda repeated on the loop of Russian television insists that black is white and white is black, it becomes easy to believe it. Metaphorically speaking, Oleksandr's book traces the dramatic transition of Ukraine's east from the wild fields to Russian occupation. More specifically, it charts the shift from the Soviet-era propaganda image of Donbass as the industrial heart of USSR economy into a new, challenged reality shaped by the collapse of Soviet Union and the outbreak of Russo-Ukrainian War. Propaganda presented Donbass as a driving force behind the Soviet socialist utopia, with Donetsk and Lugansk portrayed as a home to heroic miners, people celebrated not only for their productivity, but also for their ability to endure and even thrive in the harshest of conditions. There was a time when salary in the Donbass miners were among the highest in the Soviet Union, attracting workers from far and wide. The figure of the miner, immortalized in the concept of Stakhanovism, named after a miner who famously broke production records, became a symbol of hard work. But this heroic status came at a cost. The mining profession, romanticized by propaganda, was in fact dangerous, outbreak, and deeply damaging for health. For a generation of miners, it was incredibly difficult to reject this imposed identity. When the hero myth crumbled, miners were left exposed, no longer heroes, but ordinary people facing methane explosion, which Soviet newspapers never reported, and poverty. To me, one of the great strengths of Oleksandr's book is how it helps us understand the idea of post-traumatic identity in Ukraine's East. What happens when a whole generation loses its symbolic status? When the mines close, when the infrastructure collapses, when material conditions deteriorate and people begin to live en masse. In this vacuum, many miners took to the street in protest, and later, some turned to support Russian-backed separatists, not out of ideology, but out of disillusionment and despair. As infrastructure crumbled and the region's social fabric began to fray, Donetsk and Lugansk moved further away from their industrial past. Today, the cities and towns of these regions, largely destroyed, have lost not only their industry, but also their sense of continuity. They transformed into space of war cacophony. Their soundscapes defined not by the hum of machinery, but by explosions and shelling. I Will Mix Your Blood with Coal is, at its core, a book about this painful metamorphosis of Ukraine's East. This process has also been captured in Ukrainian documentary film, from Dziga Vertov's The Symphony of Donbass, released in 1931, to Igor Minayev's film Cacophony of Donbass. Oleksandr's books powerfully reflect the transition from a univocal perception of the Soviet myth of Donbass as a socialist paradise to the multi-voiced reality of the Ukrainian East. And it is precisely this multi-voicedness that creates space for meaningful dialogue, interpretation, and emotional engagement. It invites readers not only to rethink the region's past, but also to embrace the full spectrum of human experience: grief, hope, disillusionments, and the resilience. As a reader, I found myself listening for the voices of those forcibly resettled to the Donbass from the Carpathian villages of Western Ukraine in the 1940s and the early 1950s. In particular, I was trying to hear the voices of the people from the village of Kamenka who were deported to the Pokrovsk area. My question to Oleksandr is whether in the course of his work, he happened to meet residents from these deported communities to hear their stories. These people and their descendants have spoken Ukrainian from the very beginning of their settlement in the region. They never abandoned their Ukrainian identity. Their stories, I believe, could also open windows and doors into the still unwritten history of Ukraine East. Finally, I would like to express my deep gratitude to Oleksandr Myhkhed for his service, as well as for his intellectual responsibility and the courage to start writing about his vision how the true story of Ukraine's East should look. Thank you.
Дякую, пані Марія.
Дуже дякую, пані Марії, за надзвичайно проникливі коментарі. Пане Олександре, вам слово.
Thank you so much, Pani Mariya. Yeah, that's a huge honor to have this feedback about my humble work. Considering the question about the those who've been forcibly resettled from the Carpathian villages of Western Ukraine, we've never met them actually, and we've met, for example, people from Greece community, the Armenian community, but it was not the focus of our research. I would say, I would put it like that. But on the other hand, for the I Will Mix Your Blood, I've conducted the interview with Igor Kozlovsky, who told me a lot about different minorities and specificities in the ethnical level of Luhansk and Donetsk region. And I particularly could remember the striking stories told by Serhiy Zhadan, who told that, for example, in his Starobilsk town, in his childhood, they would usually say, for example, if somebody would travel from Starobilsk to Donetsk, they would say, oh, let's go to Donbass, as they clearly understood that they're part more likely of Slobozhanщина than being part of Donbass, and that his particularities saying that it is more of Luhansk region that should be considered as part of Slobozhanщина, and more like that, and telling the stories of different representatives who are still keeping their Ukrainian-oriented Carpathian identities as well.
Yes, thank you.
Дуже дякую, пані Марії. Чи є у вас ще якісь запитання до пана Олександра?
Ні. No, thank you very much. Дякую, пане Олександре.
Шановне товариство, у нас ще залишилося кілька хвилин, і прошу, ставте питання. У вас є така прекрасна нагода поспілкуватися з паном Олександром. Пані Надія, будь ласка.
Олександр, я дуже вам дякую за вашу надзвичайно важливий і цікавий проєкт і за вашу доповідь. Ви, коли показували слайди, то на слайді, де є цитата із Сюсюри «У квітці, в пташині, в електровогнях, у пісні, у кожній», ви казали, що ви повернетеся наприкінці своєї доповіді до цієї цитати і до цієї будівлі. Але вам забракло часу, то я прошу вас повернутися до цього. І заодно хочу запитати, як Хто обирав цитати, як ви обирали цитати, і як ви обирали місця розташування їх? Дякую.
Yeah. Дякую, пані Надія. So the story is that the picture that I showed from the Russian so-called war correspondence, that was the thing that I mentioned. That was actually this mural with Slava Ukraini and the lines from Susura. So that was the part of the ending of this plot, and they particularly took this mural as the example of the Ukrainian identity marked landscape, and I am proud of this. Considering the lines, it was the intense work of myself with Jerzy Konopie, and this was collaborative decision about the what lines we could pick up, as well as it was something in terms of planning getting the official permissions from the local government, so we could work on the walls, as well as, for example, when we've created this, like each time when you are working on the public art, you're having the public discourse with locals. Why would you put Susura over here? And I remember one particular guy who said for this that we've discussed the electricity part, that he said, why would you put Susura? I want Lermontov here. And that would be properly, I think this is the point. And I gave him a short lecture about the biography of Susura and how he is connected with Lysychansk, and apparently Susura is more connected to Lysychansk than Lermontov might be, and that is how it works. And then where he called police, and police officers appeared, and we showed all the official permissions. So this was something that in between how you could make a collage of quotes from Susura in combination with the legal side of it, as well as the educational function of your project with talking to the locals and sharing the Susura poems with them as well.
Дякую.
Дуже дякую. Може, ще в когось є запитання? Якщо немає, то я власне маю кілька запитань, не знаю, чи вистачить часу нам на обговорення. Пане Олександре, дуже дякую ще раз за блискучу доповідь. Ви згадали у своїй доповіді декомунізацію. І наголосила на тому, що процес декомунізації надзвичайно важливий. Я хочу вас запитати, чи спостерігали ви, яким чином ця декомунізація пов'язана з дерусифікацією, чи спостерігали ви процес дерусифікації у містах, якими ви подорожували, і в чому це виявлялося?
Дякую, пані Світлана. Я думаю, що окей. I wouldn't say that it was something about the Russification connected with the decommunization. I would say that it was so important what we've seen in terms of the activists, that it was so important for them to show off, to display their identity in the public space. For example, like when there was an event, they would show up in vyshivankas or with the t-shirts stating something about "Кохайтесь чорнобриві, але не з москалями", something like that, with the quotes from Shevchenko or something else. So I think it was something that activists would feel that they should stay strong and they should stay connected between each other, as well as displaying this. As well as, for example, I remember a festival, for example, put it like this. There was a huge concert of Okean Elzy in Lysychansk city stadium, and that was the event for the whole region. And no matter what language you speak, for sure you should be there, because that's the biggest event for the whole region, and people from Rubizhne would appear, people from Severodonetsk would travel there probably for the first time in 20 years that they had the opportunity or any reason to go from Severodonetsk to Lysychansk and share that. And I think the same what happened, for example, in these public lectures and discourses during our work in Lysychansk with Susura poetry, for example, on the local beach in late night when two workers appeared and they again started confronting us, stating that we don't need these Ukrainian language inscriptions here. But by the end of the night, we concluded that no matter that their political views and our political statements, we share, for example, love to music of Kuzma Skrabin and the group Skrabin, especially. So the music might be some kind of peaceful negotiations inside of it, as this is the part of our common pop culture. We might not share the same figures from the communist past, but the pop culture from 90s and 2000, which was absolutely brilliant in terms of Ukrainian pop music, for example, it worked for that. So I think it was one of the instruments for getting together.
Дуже дякую, надзвичайно цікаво, пане Олександре. На жаль, шановні колеги, наш час добіг кінця, час нашої секції. І ще раз хочу подякувати панові Олександру і пані Марії за пречудову просто секцію. Мені здається, що годі було шукати кращого доповідача для те, щоб поговорити про мистецтво і війну, ніж пан Олександр Myhkhed. І я думаю, що колеги підтримують мене у цьому. Вдячна за всі ваші міркування, за всі ваші роздуми, за ваш цікавий проєкт. Пане Олександре, пані Марія, спасибі вам велике і спасибі усім колегам, які долучилися сьогодні. Дякую і бажаю вам нам продовження успішної конференції.
Дякую.
Дякую, пані Світлана. Дякую, пані Марія. And thanks for the invitation. Thank you.
І ще хочу, колеги, попросити пані Марії і пане Олександре поділитися посиланнями, на які ви згадували у своїй доповіді. Там. Пані Марія, не чуємо вас.
Я зараз буквально в чат можу скинути 3 посилання.
Так, будь ласка,
Зараз я це зроблю.
Спасибі, колеги. У нас перерва 30 хвилин і наступна секція почнеться через 30 хвилин. Правильно, Ірино? Я правильно кажу?
Так, все правильно. Наступна секція розпочнеться об 11 годині за нашим часом.
Так, Ірина Волошина буде головувати на цій секції.
Yes, thank you so much to our first panel. As Svitlana and Irina say, we will return in half an hour. I will leave the Zoom open with a note, and I will be back to set up technical things just before the session. Thank you to everyone.